The government's decision to remove APR raises a much more fundamental and difficult question for so many farmers up and down the country. I think that the biggest threat to British family farms isn't necessarily in the financial implications that the budget has created, although those will be huge. It's the mental and psychological consequences that this decision has created. There are plenty of well-paid accountants and lawyers who can work around the financial aspects, but so many farmers are beginning to ask themselves, what's the point? And that is a much more difficult question to answer. Labour's budget has seen one of the biggest changes in farming for over a century. For those not directly involved in the industry, agricultural land had 100% inheritance tax relief, meaning that it could be passed down to the next generation tax-free. This encouraged future generations to farm the land without having to deal with excessive debt burdens at the point of death. Many of you might think, well, that just makes it fairer. Houses and other assets are subject to inheritance tax, so why should farmers be any different? But the implications of taxing farmland go way beyond the asset itself. It's about food security, climate change, our environmental goals, protecting and maintaining the British countryside that we all know and love. It's our ability to feed the nation. And in an increasingly uncertain world, we really shouldn't take our eye off these very fundamentals that so many of us take for granted. The strange thing about farming and farmland is that to an outsider it represents an enormous asset, but it's important to realise that the monetary value of this land is never actually realised. And the productive value of this land, the amount of money that you can actually generate from it, is so out of kilter with the price of land itself. With these new taxes, farmers are now having to pay way over the odds compared to the value that they can actually derive from the land. We are now 3 weeks post-budget, and the decision to remove APR feels like a death in the industry. Now I should add, I don't really believe in the whole clickbaity style, I can't afford to die, or this will be the death of British farming type rhetoric, but from an emotional perspective, it really does feel like it. There has been a huge amount of anger from farmers around the changes in APR, and rightly so, and possibly even some denial. Now we're entering the bargaining phase, and I've just come back from the mass rally that took place in London to try to get the government to at least reconsider their position on this. But governments tend to have a very poor track record of backtracking on policy, so failing the desired outcome, we enter into a period of depression, followed by every single commercial farmer up and down the country waking up and accepting the harsh reality of the hand that we've been dealt. And that is where I think things will get really difficult. The decision to remove APR was just another blow for an industry that is already on its knees. The anger that we saw at the protests in London has been building for years, if not decades, and it is the straw that broke the camel's back. The demands placed on farmers just keep increasing. Produce cheaper and cheaper food to higher welfare standards for less and less return. On top of this, we now have the environmental responsibilities to nurture and protect the very land on which we farm. We've had to endure Brexit, COVID, the war in Ukraine, trade deals with Australia and Canada that undermine the very food that we produce in this country. We've seen input costs skyrocket, commodity prices take a nosedive, and we've endured decades worth of farmer bashing from the uneducated eco-warriors who think farmers are the cause of climate change. With farmers working longer hours, with increasing mental health issues and on-farm returns of less than 1%, even those with the stoutest heart are beginning to ask themselves, what's the point? You see, APR was more than just a tax incentive. It was the entire bedrock under which the entire industry was built. Farmers don't do it for the money because there is so little of it going around. As many people have mentioned, you could sell your farm worth 5 million quid, stick it in a bank account at 5% and earn 250 grand a year sitting in front of the TV doing absolutely nothing. And I dare say that's in excess of what a lot of farms will make this year. So why do they do it? Well, they do it for the lifestyle, for the passion, for the sense of self-worth that comes with producing a basic human need that helps feed the nation. There's the identity that comes with farming and being a farmer, and the ability to live and work in some of the most incredibly stunning British countryside. And of course, there's the legacy. To know that future generations of your family will have an element of security, that they can build on what you've achieved, gives the outgoing generation peace of mind. Now I know that there's plenty of financial trickery that we can use to mitigate a lot of this and that we have 16 months to work it out, but there'll be those for which it is just unavoidable. Those that are just too old, or those that experience a sudden death, remembering that agriculture is one of the most dangerous industries in the UK. That represents a very large tax bill for the next generation to pay. That bill, that risk, for many, I'd argue, is just too big a price to pay. Now, I don't have the answer to this question, and I think it's a very personal one that each and every individual farming family will have to answer themselves. But the mental burden that this is now placed on farmers, I think, is one of the biggest hills that many will have to climb. With increasing uncertainty, lower returns, and now the removal of BPR, keeping going is often the hardest thing to do when there's very little to work for.